Hello, everyone, and welcome to a short video here, just giving you a quick overview of Chapter 4. Hopefully, by now, you're starting to settle in. We've gotten through the first three chapters of Excel, and the first three chapters, as I explained in my last demo video, sort of give you an overview of data entry, formatting, some basic formulas and functions, a few things that perhaps you haven't seen before yet, things like the if function, the VLOOKUP get introduced. I talk about doing calculations with dates. Those are all things that, again, get us a foundation. And so when we get to Chapter 4, we do take sort of a detour or a turn. Not that it's going to be necessarily new for many people. Creating charts and graphs of some kind, whether it's on pencil and paper, whether it's on software of some sort, is something you've done before or seen in other classes. But we're going to talk about how to create charts and graphs in Excel. The book topic or the book title of the chapter has to do with financial data, but really it doesn't matter whether you have financial data, whether you have sports data, whether you have scientific data. The spreadsheet works the same way. So the goal is to take data that we have or information that we've been given and make it into a picture, because again, the adage is a picture is worth 1,000 words. Oftentimes implies, again, our eyes would glaze over if we looked at page after page after page of raw data. Even if I had summarized data that would fill up a paragraph or a page, again, our eyes oftentimes gloss over. It's hard to understand what it means, what's important out of here. When I get a graph, oftentimes the story shows up right there in front of our eyes. And so we can see, oh, that particular category is way bigger than the others. Or, in a line chart, that particular year is abnormally small or abnormally big compared to the others. And again, we still might have to write about it or talk about it, but the graph shown on a screen or a presentation gives the reader an ability to sort of instantly sift through all of that data and see the conclusion, or at least be led to the insights that might lead to some type of action. And so one of the things that's not in the textbook is something that I oftentimes spend a little bit of time with in class, which is what are some of the most common types of charts for business? That's not all that difficult for most students. With a little bit of thought, you can come up with most, if not all, of the items that are on my list. But we do have one other piece that I oftentimes talk about is, well, with what kind of data can or can I not use those? And that piece sometimes is a bit trickier for people. And so if we look at some of the most common types of charts and graphs, again, I put them in order as kind of what I would pick or what I think. I have a little bit of rationale, but I have no data per se to say, well, this is what is actually out there in the world. That's perhaps a difficult thing to get actual hard data on. But pie charts almost always come up number one or two when I ask students or ask others, whether it be undergraduate students, whether it be MBA students. Pie charts are a popular form of visualization that you learn starting in first, second grade. You start drawing circles, shading in the regions. You have physical pie charts. You make them on with protractors. You use them to calculate angles. All that stuff that you did kind of in a manual way, and now we're using software to do it. And when you make a pie chart, the one distinction that may not have been always so clear or made clear to you is that pie charts work with categorical data. If I have a pie chart and I want to know what percentage of students are members of athletic teams or which are not, I need a pie chart. It's going to have two slices, yes or no, in terms of athletics participation. Or if I want to know, among people that are in professional studies, what is your major? Again, the circle, the whole represents professional studies students, and then I break them out into majors. business, nursing, social work, etc. And so we end up talking about percentages of a whole. And in a statistics class, we spend more time talking about summarizing raw data. We will do a little bit of that in this class because it is something that people do with Excel. But categorical data, where I have categories, gender, race, major, religion, whatever categories we might create, students that pass a class, fail a class, that's a category, grades of A, B, C, etc. are categorical. When I have that kind of data, all I can do is counts and percentages. How many students got an A? How many students got a B? What percentage of the class got an A or a B? When I have categorical data, I can use a pie chart to show those percentages of a whole. I wouldn't use pie chart data to represent time series data. If I had what was the average GPA of the first year class at Augsburg for the last 5 years, it doesn't make sense to put each of those averages into a pie chart, for the last 5 years, label them as years, and then get a pie chart. And, again, Excel would create something just like it will in the stuff we talked about in chapters 1 through 3. You give Excel data, it will, and tell it to do something. It will try to do it, and oftentimes will do it, even if it's not the right thing to do, because again, Excel is fast, but it is not smart. It will do what you tell it to do. And so you could use Excel and accidentally create a pie chart that is perhaps either inappropriate, is unreadable, or perhaps portrays the information incorrectly. So again, when we use software, we have to take responsibility for what it is we're creating to make sure that it is appropriate. And the same caveats are going to be true here in chapter 4 as the last one, in that again, SAM activities, they give you very specific instructions. And so sometimes it's easy to get lulled to sleep because it tells you do this, do that, put it here, do it there, etc. But in the real world and in some of our critical thinking activities, exam activities, projects, etc., you're going to have to make some of those decisions. And that's where, again, when Sam isn't telling me exactly what to do, or when my supervisor at an internship isn't there giving me step-by-step, minute, detailed instructions, I have to understand what is the appropriate choice. What should I do here? Should I make a pie chart? Should I make a bar chart? Should I make a line chart, etc.? And so a bar chart or a column chart is the what I put the second most popular in the list of top or common chart types for business. And in Excel, a bar chart, the bars go left to right. Your mind, the bars probably go up and down like a jail or a zoo. If you want bars that go up and down, Excel calls that a column chart. And so again, just a slight difference in the terminology is important. Again, every program can have their own terminology for some of these things, and it's not always going to be standard. And bar chart and column charts end up on this list at number 2, perhaps even number 1, arguably, because they are like a Swiss Army knife. I can create a bar chart where each bar represents a category. Number of English majors, number of Spanish majors, number of math majors, number of computer science majors, etc. And I can do counts, I can do percentages, but I can also use a bar chart or a column chart for time series, where I could say, how much money did our company make in profit in 2002, 2003, 2004, 2005? And with time series data, I still have a value that I want to graph, in this case, total amount of dollars of profit, but each bar represents a single time period. And that could be yearly, it could be monthly, it could be quarterly, it could be daily. Again, just depends on what it is and how I want to display the information that I have. But bar charts or column charts, again, have a dual purpose, categorical or time series. And so when you are presented with categorical data and no instruction, again, it's reasonable to create a pie chart. It's reasonable to create a bar chart or a column chart. Again, whichever one might be the one that you choose could be based on personal preference, could be based on space, the ability to fit it on the page or on the slide or so forth. Could be that your audience has a preference, or your manager who's the consumer has some preferences. Again, you have to work through those things. But if you're given no direct instructions like a SAM project, again, a bar chart or a pie chart could be correct, or would be correct, for categorical data. Now, if I had time series data, a pie chart would definitely be incorrect. And so, again, we have to be aware of these things, which are sometimes obvious, sometimes it's just that we haven't thought about them. And, again, they're more along the lines of common sense, but they're good to have pointed out. When I have a line graph, that I have as number 3. A lot of people will see line graphs. You look at business information, financial information, you see line graphs. Again, the key idea in a line graph is that typically it is a time series that I'm showing profit from 2020 to 2021 to 2022, etc. And I connect the dots to show the order of time. And again, we oftentimes take for granted or don't always state the obvious, but time, just like we read left to right in English, we also show time left to right. So moving left to right on the number line for the calendar would show us the progression over time. And so if the line is going up as the years go by, that means, sales are increasing. If the line is going down, the value that we're tracking is decreasing. Again, something that is fairly obvious. But again, if you tell Excel to put the years in reverse order for some reason, and then you create put the numbers in, you could make a graph that looks like things are going poorly when sales are actually getting better and better and better. And again, you don't want to fight the common convention of time moving from left to right on a calendar line. Area graphs are probably a little bit less common, but the idea of them, and they're easy enough to create in Excel. An area graph just takes the line that I create when I connect the dots in a time series, and I fill in or paint the area below. And so they really are brother, sister. It's just a formatting thing. And again, when I have an area graph, again, time should go left to right. And it's not uncommon. You can also use an area graph with a couple of different series of data, or same as with a line graph, where I could have a line that represents sales, another line that shows profits, because again, depending on economic conditions, depending on lots of factors, sales might go up over time, but perhaps profitability is going down. If I'm in a period of inflation or rising costs, or if I'm not raising my prices fast enough at the point of sale, well then, sales could be going up, but I'm making less and less money on each sale. And so sometimes it's useful to put more than one series on a line graph or an area graph. And then the last most common type of chart that we might encounter is something that you certainly talk about in economics classes. You talk about supply and demand. You create scatter plots, or you are shown scatter plots. And a scatter plot can be used certainly in economics, but it can be used in almost any area where I have two quantitative variables that I'm interested in, and I want to know something about the relationship. Maybe I want to know something about the price of gasoline and the quantity that is purchased. And so, again, in economics class, we might, understand, well, if the price of gas were to go up, we would expect the volume of gas to be purchased to go down. We might look at relationships between advertising and sales. Again, if I'm spending money on advertising, increased advertising should hopefully lead to increased sales. And so again, I could track that data day by day, week by week, month by month, year by year. How much did we spend in advertising? How much did we sell? And look for the relationship. I can do the same thing with financial or stock values. What's the price of the stock, as a relation to, say, price per earnings, or some other measure of the company's financial success. And in a scatter plot, we're looking to see, well, is there a positive relationship? As one variable goes up, so does the other. Or in some cases, there's a negative relationship. When one variable goes up, the other goes down. The kind of the common classic example that I use for that, especially in a statistics class, is the price of a used car and mileage. Again, if I were to go out and survey cars on a car lot and say, well, how much is the price of the car? How many miles does it have on it? I could gather that data. They're both quantitative variables. And if I put it on a scatter plot, I would see a relationship that the higher the miles, typically, but not always, would the price of the car tend to go down. That there's this negative relationship. As miles go up, price goes down. Again, that's a function that the car is older, it may need more maintenance, a lot of things. Again, it doesn't explain all of the action with prices. Again, there are differences between different models. So if I did that data collection only on Honda Accords built in a particular year, I would see that pattern relatively strongly. It still wouldn't reflect all of the things. A car with low mileage might have been in an accident, and so it's a cheaper price. There may be other additional items added to a car, add-ins after the factory that raise the price of a car, even though it has perhaps higher than normal miles, that would cause it to be more expensive. There's lots of variability, and that's what a scatter plot is trying to show us. What's the relationship between these two variables, and how much variation is there? How much scatter is there? And so we won't do a lot with scatter plots. There's certainly ones that you'll see in science, you'll see them in economics. It's not difficult to create in Excel if you were asked to. And so I'm going to jump out of PowerPoint here and quickly jump into Excel. And I'm going to leave most of the details for the SAM path and SAM activities, because again, the textbook does a decent job at showing some of these things. One of the things, though, that it doesn't do, it doesn't mention, so I won't say it does a bad job, it just omits, just like it doesn't omit what I just talked about in terms of types of graphs and when you might use them and when they would be appropriate. It also doesn't fully address the situation that we will encounter and you might encounter, which is, say I have some data here. I have 10 students, and I might have done a survey. Maybe we're going on a trip or a field trip, and we want to go to a restaurant for lunch. I ask them what's their favorite cuisine. And so they give me data, and I got a bunch of columns, or I should say a bunch of rows, 10 rows of data for 10 different students. They've each voted for their favorite cuisine. Well, in this particular case, if I wanted to make a graph of this, the one important thing to know about Excel is I can't simply just say, well, highlight the data in column B on the different kinds of cuisine and push a button and it'll make a graph. Now, there are some statistics programs out there that will do that kind of thing, but in Excel, if I want to make a graph, I can't give it quote unquote raw data. I need to give it summarized data. And so either I need to be told how many of these items are there, or I'm going to need to create a small, and I'll use the word table here with a lowercase t, and you'll understand why when we get to chapter 6. But I could create a small listing of the summarized data that would make a graph. And so in this particular case, if I listed out these things and I were to count them up, which I've done already, I know that Italian had 4 votes, that American had 3 votes. We had 2 votes for Mexican. So I could create a listing, and we had 1 vote for Chinese food. And so here is my data. I'm going to shrink this up just to make it a little easier to see. I've got my cuisines. I've got my number of votes. Now, if I've summarized that data, whether by hand, whether it's by function, whether it's later on using a pivot table out there in the middle of the semester, I can now make a graph. And so when I have this data summarized, now I can say, well, where is the actual numerical values? In this case, I'm going to highlight 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm going to go to the insert ribbon, And graphs are objects that we put on top of the spreadsheet. Unlike chapter 3, where we're writing formulas, functions, formatting, things that are in a spreadsheet cell, insert is going to give me the ability to create a chart. And I want to make a pie chart. So I'm going to go down and say, there's a button that says pie chart, and then there's a drop-down arrow. It actually gives me a bunch of choices, so I can get not just a pie chart, but three-dimensional, two-dimensional. I can make a donut chart, some other variations. I'm going to pick the basic two-dimensional pie chart. And when I do that, I'm going to get a graph, the start of a graph. It's not the finished product at this point, but it's going to give me the data that I had highlighted. It's going to create the start of a graph that I can now finalize. And you'll note that I didn't just highlight all the data and then try to click create a pie or a bar or whatever kind of graph I wanted, because that oftentimes leads to mistakes. A lot of first-time Excel users will do that. They just say, highlight a bunch of data, tell Excel to make it a chart, and they hope and pray it works. Sometimes it does, but a lot of times it doesn't. And the problem is, if you don't know what to do after that, you're kind of stuck. And so that's why I take this a little bit more step-by-step process, where I highlight the data first, pick the chart type that I want. That will create a new ribbon, the chart design ribbon. That is an additional one that shows up when I have a chart. It allows me to change colors. It allows me to change what they call styles. And so I can, not only have the colors, but I could have colored backgrounds, whether I have titles on the side, legends, etc., all the different pieces of how it could potentially look. And so I'm going to leave the style as it is. And I'm going to go to an icon that is over on the right-hand side that says select data. And this is where I can go in and start to make some changes. So when I highlighted the data, that is what's called a data series. It calls it series 1. And I might go in and I'm going to say edit. And all I'm going to do is edit and call this cuisine choice. This is a labeling purpose. And for the horizontal category labels, well, the labels that go along with the slices of pie in my pie chart are these 4 cells, D3 to D6. When I click OK, that's what's going to tell Excel, okay, here's the information that is going to go along with, well, the blue pie chart is Italian, the orange is American, the gray is Mexican, and the yellow is Chinese. And so if I do that and click OK, now I have a better pie chart. I've got the pie itself. I've got the legend down below. We'll learn how to change that. I might change the title. So I have a title here. Cuisine choice is kind of okay, but I might say, the title can be more descriptive, so that, again, I don't have to read a bunch of paragraphs or go through an explanation of what it is. It should be sort of self-evident. And so I could say student cuisine choice for field trip, so I can give a little bit more context. One thing to know about charts is that if I change a number, so say if this 40 or this 4 had been a 40, well, when I change that number in the spreadsheet, the graph automatically updates. So just like a relative reference, it is dynamic. Changing a value changes the chart. I'm going to go back and change it to 4, which is what I had before. And again, if I click on the chart itself, it's going to bring back the chart design and chart format ribbon. When I click away, it goes off. So that's something to be aware of. I'm going to go back to click on the chart and go to chart design and talk about chart elements. So this is where I can turn on or off what I call bells and whistles. In this particular case, we already have a chart title, but I could either move it above or have it centered and overlaid. I'm going to talk about the legend here. So the legend is those color-coded labels. Again, I could say, well, I want the legend on the left. Oops. And if I click that choice, well, then now the labels are on the left instead of the bottom. I could put them on the right, the top. You get some choices there, and it automatically applies some formatting. And so I end up with a chart. I could also turn on one of the other items, which is data labels. And so I might say, well, I want a data label on the outside end. And when I turn on the data label, it's giving me the count. But again, if I go back to data labels and I say more data label options, I could go in and it's going to bring up a window on the right where I could turn off the value and turn on the percentage. And if I then keep those settings, so I could X out of that and it'll save those changes. Now in my pie chart, I see something that's a little more traditional where I have 40% Italian, 30% American, 20% Mexican. I can see how those percentages actually are. And again, when I change a number, if this happens to be 6 instead of 4, those labels automatically update with the change in the data. And so again, that's a helpful thing where the data might change day to day, week to week, month to month, report to report. And I don't have to do all that math over and over again. I just change the raw data. Or if I were to get even more sophisticated using some MIS or computer science, maybe I automatically have the data feed right into the spreadsheet charts. They automatically update these graphs. And so, I take the human element out of it almost altogether. Obviously, that's more sophisticated and not something we're going to get into too much, but it shows you an idea where, I can start building these spreadsheets and reports and templates that, could be automated to generate the information, but would reflect real time or current data based on the passage of time. And so I can make that chart. I always show that you can move this around. Again, it's an object. It sits on top of the spreadsheet cells. That can be good. It can also cover up stuff, so you got to be careful about that. When you have the chart design ribbon, you should also be able to choose to move the chart. So you can click on that icon and it'll either allow you to move it as an object in this sheet or a different sheet. Or you also have the option to make it an entirely new chart sheet. And so I might make a new tab in my workbook. I'm going to call it cuisine, click OK. And that new tab is actually going to be just that graph. There's no spreadsheet cells. There's no A1, B2, etc. It's just that graph. And sometimes this is used as a way to print a graph on a full-size 8.5 by 11 paper. Again, it's auto-sized for that. It could also be used as sort of a four-man slideshow. So I could click on a number of these and talk about them in the course of a meeting or during a Zoom call with a client. Again, I might do some things with formatting. And again, these objects, whether it's the title, whether it's the legends, they are just text boxes. So I could go to the home ribbon and say, well, that's a little small. Let's blow up the font here. Let's make it 20-point font. And now I have bigger legend labels. In the same way, I can do that with the percentages. Again, I could say, well, maybe I want them to be easier to read. So I'm going to blow up those percentages on the data labels. And so again, the tools of Excel give you a quick start. You can create a pie chart with a couple of clicks, and then you can play with these, what I would call not necessarily bells and whistles, but there are ways to make them prettier, the way to format them, to make them easier to read, to make them look more professional looking, to have descriptive titles. You're going to do a fishing, hunting, and wildlife activity this week. I'll have a separate video talking about the results of that. But again, one of the important things related to charts and graphs is not only how do I create them in Excel, but there's also a skill that is ultimately important, which is data literacy or statistical literacy. How do can I read and write and speak about data that shows up in charts and graphs and tables. And so this fishing, hunting, wildlife activity is oftentimes something we've done in class. Obviously, in an asynchronous class, we can't quite do it the same, but I'll have you do it, answer those questions, and then I'll have a video sort of lecture or reveal that I've used in class that talks about what some of the right answers are and where some students make some very common mistakes. Even though it's about pie charts, bar charts, tables, etc., you're not doing anything in Excel. It's just about how to read them. Most students, when I ask them, think it's not too difficult of a task. Actually, fairly simple, fairly easy, less than a minute per question. It's not something that's going to take you huge amounts of time. And yet, when we look at the results, there's some of those things that seemed perceivably easy that sometimes people have more trouble than others with. And so, again, we'll get to that later in the week. The last thing I want to show with creating a chart and graph, I created one for you, is that one of the benefits of Excel is its flexibility. And so if I said, well, I've got a pie chart, but my boss wants me to have this data in a column chart, rather than delete it, start all over, I can go to chart design, and there is an option for change chart type. And so I can click on that, and I can say, well, I'd rather have a column chart. Technically a clustered column chart. And again, there's a bunch of flavors of column charts, 2-dimensional, 3-dimensional, etc. If I click OK, it will now create that same data underlying a column chart where the height of the column bar, whatever you might call it informally, is the height that reflects the number of observations we had or the number of votes we had for that particular cuisine. And so, and again, it gives me blue as a color. Again, I may or may not like that everything is blue. Maybe I like the pie chart where everything was slightly different colors. And so again, I could look at some of these color palettes. The color palettes by themselves may not get the variety. I'd have to go in and individually choose colors for each bar, but that is certainly within the realm of possibility. So again, there are lots of ways to take a chart, dress it up, make it look pretty, do essentially what is graphic design, but it doesn't change the underlying data or the underlying message, which is we want to take data in some cases, or eventually we'll learn to summarize it and then use it to tell a story. And we do that in Excel, and then later on in the course, we're going to learn how to do similar kinds of things with Tableau, but we're not just going to make bars or pies or some of the things that you already know, but there are some additional kinds of graphs, including maps, that we can make without having to do any programming. Again, it's going to be a point-and-click environment with Tableau in the end of the course. And so that's where I'm going to stop for now. Again, if you have questions on creating charts and graphs, feel free to reach out. The SAM path will get you through those activities this week. Again, it will be a pre-exam and training, so there's no post-test. Unfortunately, a couple of these got released before I realized that those changes needed to be made, and it won't let me revise that. So you'll do the pretest, you'll get some of them right, you'll get some wrong. The ones you get wrong, you will then follow up with and do the training on. And once you've completed the training on all of the open items, then you would be 100% complete, and that would be your score, or whatever percent of items you complete successfully. Otherwise, best of luck, and we'll talk to you soon.